in the heart of a maximum security prison in Texas 3 weeks ago, I saw the real harvesting of this work. 10 of us from Illuman had gone down 100 miles southeast of Dallas to a prison where our good man Dennis McCain had invited us. This is an area where there are 5 maximum security prisons holding up to 17,000 men, one of them for the criminally insane. As we came in the Michael unit where we were working, we passed through 3 fences, 18-foot high chain link fences with 3 layers of concertina razor wire. We came in through 3 or 4 checkpoints, metal detectors, pat-downs, ID checks, and the masculine, in-your-face masculine energy. You could just feel the control everywhere in that place. There were guards, intimidating guards. I swear to you, the biggest men I've ever seen in my life. I saw 2 men. If they were anything, they were 7 feet tall and 400 pounds. Talk about intimidation. And then there was what I called the posse that came through the gym where we worked on those 2 days together. These were about half a dozen higher level guards with gray cowboy hats, black and gray uniforms, 6 guns on their side, and they walked through as if to remind us that they owned the frickin' place. Testosterone up the wazoo. We heard the prisoners' stories. Heartbreaking stories of men who'd gotten trapped in drug running along the border, who'd been taught how to torture, rape, kill as was necessary. And at the same time, and in some cases the same men, we saw incredible human beings. We had gone to talk about the Desert Fathers, men's spirituality and shadow work. And we saw Desert Fathers ourselves there. This is a leather-tooled notebook done by a man named Jimbo. Been there 26 years. It's got a Desert Father on the cover. And we saw it in real life. The Desert Fathers, I mentioned Abba Moses the Black, one of the most esteemed Desert Fathers, who had been a robber and brigand. He had killed people before his conversion and going into the desert to be a monk. One of his teachings, he said to the other monks, "Stay in your cell and your cell will teach you everything." Now, that's heard differently when you're inside a maximum security prison for 26 years. We are able to make a choice of going into our cell to practice centering, meditation, whatever we do. They have no choice in terms of their bodies. They are incarcerated. But I tell you, the power when you see a man who chooses to do what he has to do anyway, that gives him an incredible freedom. Your body may be incarcerated, but your mind and your heart is free. And we saw that. It was an experience. Did it not radically change us? It was a mission in reverse. We went thinking we were going to talk about the Desert Fathers to these men, about forgiveness, about radical grace, what our teacher had taught us. And we got it given back, shown back to us again and again. There's a harvesting here on several levels in that experience. And I want to define harvesting as those times in your life when all the pieces come together in unexpected ways. Those times when you say to yourself, wow, I am harvesting a whole lot more than I planted. I'm getting out of this a whole lot more than I put in. Was I really a part of this? Those are the harvesting points in your life. So on one level there at the Michael unit in near Palestine, Texas. We were harvesting work that had been done by this man, Dennis McCain. For 4 years, every Thursday he drives 100 miles each way to gather men for centering prayer and for counsel. And it was on the basis of that sowing and growing and pruning too that we were able to do some real harvesting. That's how it always happens. You harvest much more than you sow. It's on the work, on the backs of other men that have been before you, that the work gets done. The harvest is brought in. It was also a harvesting personally for each of us individually, because we had a sense of harvesting what we knew was not in us. We didn't imagine it being in us. I know Jim Taylor and I, he did counsel, I did some teaching. And we were in that room together in a double-wide trailer where we stayed the night before, Thursday night, before the 2-day event started, scared to death, not sleeping hardly at all. And a voice that kept saying to me, "Who in the hell do you think you are? Going to talk to men like this? They're going to see right through you. What kind of street cred do you think you have? They'll see how hollow you really are. They will eat you alive, fucker." And yet there was also another voice, deeper and more heard, that said, "You will be carried. You will harvest what you don't begin to know you've got in you, and it's coming through you." And we all knew that. We found it. Our finest gift at the end of the 2 days was the guy said to us, "You're not what we expected. You're just like us." Isn't that a compliment from, And we wanted to say the same thing. You aren't what we expected. You're not only just like us, you're more than us. We had in a closing liturgy, we were all bound together by a twine rope, and we had our hands together, and we were blessing all the poor people out there beyond these prison walls who hadn't experienced the kind of forgiveness and openness and sharing and love that we had found there. That's something. That is something, I tell you. I saw the harvesting of this work there in that Texas prison. And it was harvesting for me too. I'm in my harvesting years. Like Richard, I'm 72. You get to 70, you're 3 score years and 10, and you think, I don't have to take chances anymore. I don't have to take risks. I can play it safe now, until some crazy guy down in Texas called you to come to a prison. And you realize maybe you aren't to be put out to pasture entirely yet. We get surprised even in the later years of our lives, brothers. I witnessed a school of miracles there, una escuela de los milagros, even as an old buzzard. And so I want to say to the old men and the young men that the harvesting happens all the way through our lives. It does not stop. It's a daily practice for all of us. It's what we keep doing all through our lives. So I've got 3 points. First, it is a daily practice. Harvesting is not a one-time great spiritual experience that you anticipate coming. Secondly, harvesting is a matter of learning from the old ones, the white hairs, the men of wisdom who've drawn wisdom from the land. And finally, harvesting is not about giving up when the results aren't looking good. There is, first of all, a great temptation for us to think that it's a great dramatic transformation rather than the daily practice through which we experience harvesting. Let me tell you a story. There once was a man in a Tibetan village who had wanted to be enlightened. He wanted a great experience of sudden mindfulness so that he would be able to see the Buddha nature of everything. He would be present to everything. And when a famous Lama came through his village, he came to him and asked, he said he would like to be enlightened. And what should he do? And the Lama recognized his sincerity and gave him a prayer to say, and that surely that would bring him what he sought. Well, this man went off to a cave, and he devoted his life every day chanting this prayer over and over again for 20 years, waiting for this experience of enlightenment, this breaking open of mindfulness that would come to him. And nothing happened for 20 years. And the Lama came through the village again that time. The man went up to him, very agitated, and said, "What's the problem here? I'm not enlightened yet. I've been doing everything you told me to do." And the Lama said, "Gee, what did I tell you to do? I forgot." He explained this prayer that he'd been given and that he'd been praying it every day. And the Lama said, that's no use at all. I gave you the wrong thing. It's too late to start over. There's nothing you can do. I'm sorry." And you can imagine the guy says, "What the hell?" And in anger and frustration and despair, not knowing what else to do, he goes back to his cave and he sits down as he usually does to pray, but this time without any hope of attaining enlightenment. This time simply being aware, present to what is happening around him. And of course, immediately his eyes are opened. There's a great sense of presence that fills him. And he has in his ear the sound of laughter, the Lama drifting through the wind in the high mountains. One of my teachers, Ignatius Loyola, says it's the one prayer you pray every day. It's the examen. A prayer at the end of your day when you review the day. And for us in Illuman, the 5 touchstones are a good way of doing that, perhaps. You ask yourself, when did I center in some way, pulling into myself and centering in prayer and meditation? When today did I connect with a community that gives me life? When today did I connect with a person who is life-giving for me, a mentor of some sort? When did I go into nature for release in some little way? And when did I serve someone else in need? That's a daily harvesting that we all can and should do in thinking about how we are present, not just waiting for that great spiritual experience of it all coming together, anticipating some great prison experience, ministry or something. But it's that day-by-day practice of harvesting. Harvesting, secondly, is a matter of learning from the white hairs, the old ones. We think today of men like Pope Francis, men like Desmond Tutu, Jimmy Carter, Wendell Berry, men who are deeply rooted, who hold up for us the tradition of what it means to be human in the deepest sense. These white hairs, the old ones, do 2 things. They name the good. They remind us of what is worth living for most. And they also speak out against misuse of power, against what does not serve us. The harvesters, the real harvesters, are the ones who are able to distinguish the wheat from the tares, what really matters from what doesn't matter at all. And those wonderful desert fathers, they used to emphasize a fierce indifference to unimportant things. And that's what the old ones, these old farts, it can sometimes be a pain in the ass, but are also a power among us that they can remind us the importance of a fierce indifference to unimportant things. We've had them always with us. Tiresias, the blind soothsayer in ancient Greece. Lao Tzu, the great teacher in China, way of the Tao. The white-haired magician Merlin. Gandalf the Wise, Obi-Wan Kenobi. all the mythical and real white hairs among us. Very different from so many of the old men that we find in our culture today. Old men struggling in their later years, knowing how to make sense of the retirement they'd been looking for all their lives, put out to pasture, wallowing in bitterness, playing TV all day, or watching TV, or playing golf, drinking through the day, becoming a misery to their wives. The trauma of aging men is something we're more and more aware of in our society. The largest growing age group are people entering their 60s. And even yesterday, wisdom elders were talking more and more now about how to welcome men, assist men in moving into those years of the sage. What rites are needed, what teachings, what even rites of passage might be appropriate. I'm 2.5 years now, the other side of retirement. And I gotta tell you, it was scary. It was harder for me than I expected it to be. Giving up that identity of a career. You know, I was a hot shit professor for 35 years at a Jesuit university. And to go, one of the most important things I did was a death lodge out in the woods in the Ozarks of Missouri. And I burned up pages of the last scholarly paper I'd written and read at a meeting. I shaved my head, didn't have much to shave anyway, but as a sign of not worrying about what my appearance was. And I began to think of myself as a recovering scholar, working my program. Moving more and more from the head down into the heart. The white hairs call us always to a larger community, beyond a single career, beyond a single nation, beyond a single religious tradition. All the psychologists who work in stages of life say that as you move into those later stages, the end of your life, there's an expansiveness, a wholeness, an ability to embrace what you thought you had to exclude in the past. And that's what the white hairs invite us to. Wendell Berry is one of my heroes. That poet and farmer in Kentucky who calls us on our crap again and again. The dangers of a consumerist culture, the danger of thinking that national security is the most important value we have here in America. The danger of a world where men stop feeling, where men think what they're told to think. And so Wendell Berry has a series of poems about the mad farmer. One is called Manifesto, the Mad Farmer's Liberation Front. And I want you to hear a few lines from that as Stephen Gamble stands to read it with his crusty Texan voice. Stephen.
Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay. Want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbors or to die. And you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will call you. They will let you know. So friends, every day, do something that won't compute. Love the Lord. Love the world. Work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who doesn't deserve it. Denounce the government and embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all you cannot understand. In short, practice resurrection.
Oh. That's what the old ones do. Many of you know the story of the cellist of Sarajevo. Vedran Smailović played a cello with the Sarajevo Philharmonic Orchestra for years. And in the middle of the Serbian siege of the capital of Bosnia, Sarajevo, in 1992, he watched from a distance as a mortar round landed in a bread line of people standing in front of a bakery amidst all the broken, bombed city. 22 of them were killed. Civilians, women, children, men. And he was outraged. And what Vedran Smailović did for the next 22 days was to bring a folding chair and to come dressed in full concert dress, tucks and tails with his cello. And he sat there amidst the rubble every day for 22 days, playing Albinoni's Adagio in G minor. He called it his musical defiance. That in a world of war, a world of violence, a world where everything was falling apart, he would speak for what needed to be honored and kept. And so I invite you to listen to 3.5 minutes of Albinoni's Adagio in G minor. Asking yourself, what do you need to harvest? What do we need to save and honor in our world? So that carries me into my last point, that harvesting is not giving up when things look bad even. That's the danger of despair, I think, is keen for those of us in our harvesting years. Worn out, many men in our society. And I think of Elijah the Tishbite, shaggy man with a wide leather belt, he's described in 1 Kings. He was a crusty desert prophet. He was a man who'd been rode hard and put up wet. And yet his finest hour was when he confronted the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, calling down fire from heaven. They told stories about that one in Jerusalem bars for a long time. But that was kind of a distant memory by the time you get to 1 Kings 19. And Elijah now he can't remember that glory, and he's scared to death because Jezebel and Ahab, the queen and the king, have promised to kill his ass if it's the last thing they do. And so he hightails it out of town. He goes running toward Horeb, fleeing and scared to death and complaining when he gets there. Sitting in the desert, thinking that his great work of his life is over, nothing's left, it's all a waste, and groveling in self-pity, saying, God, why don't you just kill me now? Let me join my ancestors. There's nothing left. And he crawls under a bush to die. And God, of course, ignores all this nonsense and says, Elijah, what are you doing here? Stand over there on that mountain. Shut the fuck up and listen. And an earthquake and a wind and fire come through, and then a still small voice. And Elijah hears God speaking as if to him saying, Elijah, your life is not over yet. You've still got work to do, and get to it. And we read in the next few chapters, he still does have work to do. He's got 2 more kings to confront. He's got more fire to call down from heaven. He's got the Jordan River to open up, and he's got a fiery chariot to take him into heaven at the end. Elijah may have been through with his life, but God wasn't through with it. You older men may be tempted to think that you're through with your life, but God isn't. And you younger men may be afraid to commit to what you're called. It's too much to embrace the future. You don't give up. God isn't through with your life, with any of us, ever. So let me conclude with a story I shared with the guys in the prison 3 weeks ago yesterday. In the early years of Australian settlement by Europeans that came, there were 2 young brothers that were caught stealing sheep. Usually in those days they would kill cattle and sheep rustlers, hanging them. But since these boys were so young, they decided instead to brand them on the forehead with the letters ST for sheep thief. That was a hard thing to live with. One of the brothers, filled with shame and guilt, not able to handle the fact that obviously he wore it on his face that he had failed miserably in his life, made a big mistake. He went off away from the town, living alone, and he died in a few years in despair. But the other brother stayed in town, and he worked at overcoming the shame and guilt that was his. He reached out to others. He didn't try to hide. He couldn't hide his failure from the past. And he became a well-loved old man in that town. In fact, years later, a stranger came into town, went to the local pub, saw this old man around the table with others talking, and all of them laughing and listening to his stories and delighting in him. And the stranger said to a kind of young guy there, who is that, and what do those letters mean on his forehead? And the young guy who had grown up there in the town said, you know, I never thought about it. Those letters have been there all as long as I've known him. Everybody loves the man so much. I guess they stand for saint. Isn't that wonderful that the ST for sheep thief had become the ST for saint? That's what harvesting is about, brothers. Staying at it, allowing the pieces to all come together, taking each day at time to create a world where love can blossom, where it can even blossom in a maximum security prison in Southeast Texas. So what do we do? We're at the end, almost. What do? We sow innocence and wonder over and over and over again. What do? We grow in a rhythm of growth spurts and slower, darker times of fallowness. What do? We allow the anger and ego in us to be pruned again and again and again. And what do? We harvest love in the end. It's love that we harvest in the end. May it be so. Ho!